Originally from South Sudan, East Africa, by way of Egypt.
When a family member got caught up in the criminal justice system, I knew this is where I had to be.
Of course, I went through the refugee experience.
You know, I'm glad you asked that, because I think even as a nurse I was still fighting, because I saw the disparity in how they treated people like me, that looked like me, with the medications, with the health, with the surgeries, how they would,
For example, my black brother, who caught up in the injustice in the system,
they didn't have interpreters, and because of that, a couple of people ended up staying inside of a pretrial detention facility for years, languishing, when they could have been.
So the idea that despite how bad it is in Louisiana, people are hopeful, people are resilient, and are willing to fight together.
So welcome on the Word Out Community channel, the show that actually amplifies refugee stories. Those individuals actually who are making positive impacts in the lives of refugees and immigrants here in the United States and outside the United States. But on my show, I have very prominent people that have inspired most of us to also want to learn more about their work and what they do, who are they, where they come from. So keep tuned. All right, on the show I have left and right, I have very beautiful individuals who will introduce themselves and tell us what they do. I'll start from my left hand. Welcome on our show.
Thank you for having me, Emma.
Yes.
My name is Sarah Lewis Ayo. I am originally from South Sudan, East Africa, by way of Egypt, and then in Louisiana. I've been in Louisiana for the past 26 years. I came as a baby, and I will not disclose my age.
Okay.
But I've been there for 26 years. So of course I went through the refugee experience, but coming into Louisiana, just growing up there, it has become a home, but also it has its own challenges of being a black refugee child in a red state such as Louisiana. But I knew from a young age that I wanted to change a few things, and the change is linked to justice. So currently I am an organizer for VOTE. It's a nonprofit organization funded by formerly FIP people. It's formerly incarcerated folks, their families, and their allies. We do a lot of policy advocacy, organizers such as my coworker and I, and as well as voting rights. We advocate for voting rights for FIP, which is formerly incarcerated folks.
What is FIP?
FIP stands for formerly incarcerated people.
Incarcerated people. Like for somebody who don't understand the term incarcerated, is it? Incarcerated.
Yes.
What does the term mean actually?
A person who have spent time in prison, who have been in prison for some time. And I know there's a lot of negative terminology used that like to demonize and dehumanize humans, and that's something that we do not use our vote. Because we do feel like, yes, there's some people who have been incarcerated, who are been in prison, who have done sometimes. We try to give that dignity back, and just to keep away from negative terminology in that we don't believe in, and that's not what VOTE stands for.
Good.
And maybe my coworker can go more into it as well.
Tell us how are you doing today?
I'm fine.
You're good?
Yes.
You look beautiful here.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's the audience will love to know who you are, where you come from, and what do you do?
Well, my name is Amelia Herrera, and I'm originally from Louisiana, born and raised in New Orleans. My adult life I spent in California, Los Angeles, but I returned back to Louisiana in 2013 because my mom was ill. What I do is I am a community organizer and an activist. I like to say that I'm an abolitionist, but a lot of people don't like that word, so I tend to steer clear from it, although I am quite that person. I'm a disruptor. I recognize the disproportionate way that our criminal justice system handles people of color. I would only say people of color, African American people.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I got into this work. And I was a nurse. I did nursing for over 30 years, but when a family member got caught up in the criminal justice system, I knew this is where I had to be.
Sorry for what happened to one of your family members. We're totally sorry about it. But it made you to become who you are right now.
Yes.
Interesting. So, Sarah, your work, all the work you do, as criminal justice or criminal injustice?
Well, we like to say the criminal injustice system, because there's nothing just about the criminal justice system, as we say here in America.
Yep.
It's not only a personal opinion that I hold, but it's facts. When we look at how the criminal justice system behaves, especially in the state of Louisiana, where I've been learning and unlearning about how the jail system is set up, the prison system is set up, it's just unjust. And so that's why we use the word criminal injustice system. But yeah, so my work, as I mentioned, is loop around incarceration, but also just me, a person coming in who have family who've been impacted by this, my brothers. I found the need to not only advocate, but to also understand it as a refugee, because oftentimes we're caught between the cross line of being black in such a red state that it's not also racist, but we get caught up in the criminal injustice system, right? And I could go further into that later, but the idea that, for example, my black brother who caught up in the injustice in the system, oftentimes because he was a refugee and because he had a refugee status, there's certain barriers that is limited to him because of that, because he got caught up in the system. And so for a lot of like my family members, we never understood that. You know, how so? Like, what do you mean now he can't get his papers or his citizenship? What do you mean now, when we were trying to get him out, that ICE is waiting for him? What does that mean? A lot of immigrants or refugees are not aware of how this system, this criminal injustice system, birth immigration, bad policy, especially when it comes to detention centers, especially when it comes to policies that are set into not only criminalizing people, black people, but also putting them behind bars.
So what inspired you? Is your brother the reason why you got inspired, or this is something that came as the nature of you growing up and wanting to become who you are right now?
I think it was always in me, but I think also my past work. I have worked for Lori, and I think that kind of shaped my way through, because I was doing policy. And so shout out to Dauda. Yeah, so we saw, I think we had a conversation one time, like in order for us to understand policies, anti-immigrant policies that was happening in Louisiana, we need to understand the system of it. And then I got so engulfed into detention center and how the detention center operate. And I think I was like, wait a minute, in order to understand detention center and its policies, I need to understand the criminal justice system that I was trying to run away from so badly. It wasn't a shame thing, but I was just like, this is not something I want to attach to, because there's so much layers to it. I once upon a time wanted to become a lawyer because I wanted to fight the injustices that were happening to black people and what I saw living in Louisiana. They say it's always, you can run away from something or your calling, it will always find you, when the right time. And so I saw myself in that immigration space, yes. Wanted to become a lawyer once upon a time, wanted to become an immigration lawyer that focused only on detention centers. But I think being a lawyer, it fueled that for me. And then just coming in and learning, and I'm like, there's so many Africans that went through that, black Africans went through the criminal injustice system. Some of them I knew, some of them went through that justice system coming to Lori to get help. Some got deported, and some people I knew. And so there's always a connection and an intersectionality that comes with that. And I always say that it's the criminal justice system of America, it's a racist system that set up even before, like, slavery ended, and then the ideas of the Jim Crow era happened, and it birthed the criminal justice system, and then it gave birth to immigration detention and bad policies, because it's just like a ripple effect. I hope that answers your question.
It answers my question. So when you think about, when you talk about red state, is it red state?
Yes.
Louisiana. What does that mean actually? For somebody who don't actually understand red, what does that mean? Is it like having red things around?
So what I would say, a red state is just being right-wing, conservative, Republican.
Okay.
And Louisiana is known for its the right-wing thought. And when I say that, I mean white supremacy. We can't, if you say Louisiana, you can't, on the other side is going to be white supremacy, because our criminal justice system, unfortunately, it fosters a white supremacist mindset, and doing that, we call it a red state, because we as Democrats or people that are more liberal or nonpartisan, we have to fight for every single liberty, and it's hard, and so that's why we call it a red state.
Cool. So you first working as a nurse, right? Mm-hmm. In past years, right?
Yeah.
And right now you're working in criminal justice. Mm-hmm. How are you feeling? What is the difference? Like, do you feel you belong here, or you feel you want to go back to where you started from, based on what you're observing with the injustice?
I'm glad you asked that, because I think even as a nurse, I was still fighting, because I saw the disparity in how they treated people like me, that look like me, with the medications, with the health, with the surgeries, how they would, and I have to say that, someone that was of a white descent will come in and it had a surgery, and they come out with a clean, healed, nice cut, but someone that looked like me, the cut was butchered. They were kicked out of the hospital a lot faster than someone that wasn't black or African American descent. So I think that I always did fight for our rights, but I just wore a different hat. And no, I wouldn't go back to nursing. I think this is where I belong. In fact, I know this is where I belong, because I see so many injustices inside of this system. Although my loved one brought me to this point, it is not what keeps me here. What keeps me here is because I see across the board the rippling effect of white supremacist Jim Crow laws, and how the over-policing of our immigrant communities as well as our marginalized community goes hand in hand. You might call it an apple, but it's still a fruit, and you're still doing the same thing.
Okay. So, like, based on your current work that you're doing, do you think you're making impact? Do you have any successful story that you can share with the audience, just to see where you are coming from and how impactful it is?
I think so. Sometimes people don't, I do like the background. I don't like, standing in the forefront, because I think the best work and the folks that are really truly fighting in the trenches are the ones that you don't often see.
Yeah.
And so there was this time in court, they didn't have interpreters. And because of that, a couple of people ended up staying inside of a pretrial detention facility for years, languishing, when it could have been just 6 months, 2 years past, 3 years, because they couldn't get anyone to interpret, and they didn't understand what was going on. The judge nor the prosecutor took time enough to explain it to them. That was I found that to be egregious. Not only are you going to criminalize this person for something they shouldn't have, but you're also going to criminalize them for not being able to understand what you guys are talking about.
Yeah.
So we fought for that, and we protest, and we got with some of the policy writers, and now we have interpreters.
You do?
Yes, we do. In the courtroom.
It passed as a law now.
Yes, they have.
Like,
they were always supposed to have them.
They are supposed to have them, but
no
they're just ignoring it.
Yes.
Not implementing it. All right, back to you, Sarah. Doing this work, and you have a background of being a refugee. You have passed through a lot. How is this work impacting your community?
It's impacting my community in a great way, and I think, great question. And before I answer that, I just want to also highlight the fact that before Amelia and I worked together, we met in spaces where if I was going in to advocate for pro-immigrant policy or anti-immigrant policy, it's always that one face. It's like it became like it's an immigration job. Let a person of immigration space take care of that. And so I came in and I saw a black woman like me bridging the gap between the criminal justice system and immigration policy. And then she went on to talk about the unjust things that are happening in jails. She talked about bad policies that send immigrants, people that look like me, people that do not look like me, who are immigrants in jail. And she talked about a very harmful policy, the 287G, which it just criminalized. It's a stereotype policy that criminalized people for being immigrant. And it's an agreement between the sheriff's department, who are law enforcement, and the immigration, which is ICE. It's an agreement between them, and they get people in. So coming into that space and learning someone like Amelia, the first person that in my space in Louisiana, talking about that, I knew that our work was interconnected. That also gave me the affirmation that I'm in the right space. I'm going to meet the right people to talk about the work that I know would impact me and impact my community. And what I learned from that is, yes, we go back into our community and we talk about bad bills, anti-immigrant policies. And Lori does a great job with that. But also no one ever talked about the issues that impacted family like mine, right? It especially becomes a taboo in our culture, the African culture, that if someone goes to jail, we don't talk about it, right? But I remember my mom not sleeping for a whole week. We were trying to figure out how to navigate that system. That impacted us in a huge way, that now every time I hear that immigrant child is going into the system, I'm figuring out ways of how I can educate the mother, how I can educate, there's certain things you don't do, there's certain protocol that you do not understand. And so it's very impactful, but also we know that through education, through going out there and educating our community, educating our people, it's a huge impact. I hope I answered that.
Yeah, you do. You did. So now when we go back to your previous work, policy.
Yeah.
And right now, is there a difference between policy advocacy and criminal injustice? These things looks to be interconnected.
It's very interconnected.
How?
So here's the thing, and I think to sum all this up, it's very complex, right? With the criminal, and I think the difference here is when it comes to the criminal justice system is that there's a due process.
Yep.
Right? You go in, you have representation, even if it's not what it's been implemented that if you don't have a lawyer, you have rights to lawyer and all that. When it comes, that's the only difference. When it comes to immigration, there's no universal representation. Once you go from prison that is state and within the criminal justice system and go to detention, you could get representation here. When it comes to here, there's no representation, there's no due process. You're more than likely to be deported right away. Forget the fact that you did 20 years. And let's just say it's something you had no idea. You have been wrongfully convicted. Because that, again, the stereotype, the racism, the white supremacist ideologies that she mentioned earlier also plays a role in how people are being convicted, how people are being taken into prison. So it interconnect. There's intersectionality there, but the big difference is one has representation, the other doesn't. And the connection here is it's a system that's built upon each other, that helps each other. They help just gel people, house people, take more bodies in, and that's how it's interconnected.
Okay. Speaking of detention, for somebody who doesn't understand the detention, is there a difference between a jail and detention?
Oh, there's definitely a difference.
Okay.
And if I can expound a little bit on what Sarah said, because she did mention we met working in this space. We were at the Capitol, and I noticed Louisiana State Capitol, and it was during legislative session, and she was fighting.
Is that where you guys got connected?
Yeah, we also connected way before doing the sheriff.
We didn't even know we were in the same space. for 287G, and I was a panelist, and she was there, and she brought it to my attention, and it was like, we just meant, that we was going to start working together, and it's been great.
Yeah.
But yeah, that human right aspect of it, that is what that intersection is, because they're over policing the community. They're they're doing it and they're using it as an excuse now, and they're going outrageously. They're just off the, how can I say it? They're just off the chain now, how they're just bringing people in for any reason. That was just another excuse for them to go out there and over-police our communities. That's it. And to incarcerate our people. And when they say pretrial detention and jail, is that what you're asking?
Yep.
Because I'm real passionate and I kind of forget sometimes. So the pretrial means that they're just held there until they have had their day in court.
That's detention.
That's pretrial detention. So they're innocent.
Oh, they're innocent. Okay.
They're still innocent. But what we're finding is, because they're staying on the inside for so long, they're being criminalized because of poverty, because of where they're from, name status,
mental health.
Yeah. And so they're just staying in there, and this no longer a pretrial detention. They're actually treating them as if they were already guilty. And so and with jail or prison, you've already been convicted of a crime. You've already went to court. They found you that you have done the things that you were accused of. That's the speedy process, supposedly. But in the state of Louisiana, that's not what's happening. And we find people just sitting in there because of their immigration status, because of their poverty, the high bonds, the lack of the language barrier, among other things. That intersectionality of them grasping hold of our people that look like us for any reason that they can't. That disparity is so huge. It's just such a big gapping hole in the criminal justice injustice system that we founded a campaign called Unjustified. And it identifies the broken systems that lead into incarceration, and that criminalizes a lot of the things that we experience on a day-to-day basis, having to decide how we're going to feed our families, having to decide the jobs that we're having. We have to work 2 jobs sometimes to take care of our families.
To sustain yourself.
Because Louisiana is still paying minimum wage.
Of?
$7.25.
$7.25 minimum wage.
Yes.
Like $7.
$7.25.
That's minimum wage.
That's minimum wage for
in Louisiana.
Despite the fact that they're passing so many policy laws. There was, I think, over 10 years, now correct me if I'm wrong, they sent them this thing to raise the minimum wage. 10 years plus, you have a policy in the legislative session to pass minimum wage. They passed through all that. They want to cut this, do that, pass other bills, not give teachers raise. It's crazy, but that's just what it is.
What is the reason behind Louisiana? What is something that we don't know?
Like I said, and I'm sure there's other states, but specifically right now in Louisiana, a place that's so rich in culture and diversity, we're also rooted in Jim Crow. And what that means is that oftentimes people of color, African American people, our voices are not heard, and we're underrepresented. So, and with that being said, the right-wingers, the red state, the people that make it the red state, they're just running rampant in our governing bodies.
$7.
$7.25. I know.
Yeah, we got to vote. We got to get them out.
That's little money. Is it an expensive state to be in?
No. I think because also the minimum, aside from the minimum wage, is not, the living cost is not as high.
Okay.
But that still doesn't excuse. But you also have to understand there's a reason why it's set up like this. For a person who thinks logically, you're underpaying people, right? And this idea that poverty breeds death, if it's not death, this is the thing in Louisiana. If it's not death, then it's prison.
Okay. 2 things.
If it's not death, then it's prison. And a lot of time it's like our children are caught in that cross line, right? That I don't have it, so I have to go out and get it. I don't have it because you know what? I have to get it faster for my grandmother to have medicine for my mom, you know.
So they look for the shortest means to get it, and they cut themselves in
Right,
trouble.
right. And that creates trauma. They're not even considering that 725, that creates mental, that's a pathway to mental health. You're barely making it to pay rent, you know. Then God forbid you have more than one children, you know, and then God forbid you're a single mother. So what are you setting up for me, you know? And then you privatize prison, so you're making more money off of that. You privatize detention centers, immigration detention center. You make money off of that without representation. You're making money off of people. So people, it's like, it's inhumane.
It is. So based on current environment that we are living in, what's going on, like with the environment we are living in, migration issues, ICE, all these policies or suspension of funding, what do you think, and what are you planning to do? Like, what is your next project with this environment, and how can we help?
I think also, again, living in the state of Louisiana, something our governor said a few months ago, that we're so used to losing because we as a collective came together and defeated 4 bad constitutional amendments that was condensed into 4 bills. Louisiana as a collective, Republicans or Democrats or independent voter came together and we voted against that. So the idea that despite how bad it is in Louisiana, people are hopeful, people are resilient, and are willing to fight together as a collective. And you know, it takes time to get you know, it shouldn't also just be around when it's time to vote, we want to come together, but also it's going to take time to have that coalition of people. And that's something I mentioned earlier, like we'll be so powerful if we create this coalition, especially when in the nonprofit sector, of community, and that we come together, we work together. And like even if the ideas of we have to redistrict, you know, it could totally happen because Louisiana is capable. Louisiana is literally, in my head, in my personal opinion as Sarah, it's a blue state, right? And I think this is also coming from me being an organizer. We just need to organize better. You know, we need to agitate people better, so for that hope not to die, because there's possibilities. It's definitely possible.
What is your message to refugees and immigrants at this time, and what are you calling for?
For Black refugees.
Let's put it like that.
Yeah. So for my people, refugees and immigrants, of course, it takes collective work. It takes learning and unlearning. And this is also something I heard earlier from one of the conversations that we went to, is that we need to be at the same table to talk about issues that impact us, but also we are in this country because Black Americans have paved the way for us to be here. And so we need to be at the table to learn about one another and to come together in solidarity and fight, because it takes collective voices for the issues impacting us, or the fights against us. But yeah, it takes collective work. I think that's my message. Taking collective work and learning and unlearning and being in tables with our Black Americans, brothers and sisters.
Louisiana, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well, is one of the nation, is one of like
the highest. Yes, you see it, you feel it, you smell it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think also, and maybe that could be for another time, but like just growing up, my siblings and I growing up in Louisiana as Black people, but we also come from a place as indigenous Sudanese people, South Sudanese people, who are always having to fight for a place as Black people, you know, in Sudan. Coming here in Louisiana and also seeing we having to experience this as darker skinned people living in Louisiana. And when I say darker skin, I'm not talking about like skin hues, you know, like, but as Black people just in general, having to always fight, that fuel this idea of like being unapologetically Black and standing on it, being radical in your thought, because this is something that my fathers were fighting for, my grandfathers fought for until we had South Sudan, right? My uncles were jailed fighting in the Civil War once they caught. My dad was exiled, left when I was 5 years old because he believed in these ideologies that I'm not second citizen in my own country, right? And then you come here and you learn people that look like you have also gone through the same thing, and then the barriers set before them. You know, to me, for my siblings and I, that again, we became unapologetic, but also that radicalized how we want to be in spaces and how we want to move. So
it's good message to the public out there, so keep tuned.